I am Denise Fanning. I am the Arts and Exhibits Coordinator here in Park Library. Thank you so much to all of you for coming out this evening on this somewhat dreary and not ideal evening, so thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much to CMU Libraries for hosting this event this evening and for believing in the power and importance of the arts enough to support this amazing series of art exhibitions and artist talks that we have here. It's a really special opportunity to get to experience hearing the voice of an artist as they unravel their process and their practice and their progression, while also getting to experience the work that they're making now live. Some of my most formative experiences as an art student came from getting that diverse exposure to visiting artists who came to the schools where I was a student, and now outside of that student world, many years later, it's been a continued source of inspiration and sustenance to me to be in conversation and to get to listen to artists speak about their working practices. So I'm really grateful to all of you for valuing that opportunity enough to take your time to be here tonight and to absorb the wisdom and vision and experience of our artist, Brian Nelson, who's here with us tonight. So please be sure to join us in the Baby Room after tonight's talk to experience the work live and in person, to have some yummy snacks, and to chat with our artists and ask some more questions. So with that, I'll share a little bit about our artist, Brian Nelson. You're all really in for a treat here tonight. Brian is a heck of a great sculptor, a great teacher, and an amazing human, and he is hands down the most skillful and meticulous fabricator I have ever met. Because of the pristine craftsmanship and austere nature of much of Brian's work, at first glance, one could presume his work to be cold or impersonal. But in reality, nothing could be more far from the truth. When I first had the pleasure of getting acquainted with Brian and his work, we were teaching together, and I would see him feverishly cutting and bending and welding and grinding and polishing away on stainless steel in the metal shop. And I too made the immediate assumption that his work might be stark or cold or more industrial or institutional in nature. And then I saw and experienced his work installed, and I quickly realized how very, very wrong I was. The first exhibition I attended of Brian's work, which I think was at Tangent Gallery in Detroit, my eyes welled up with tears while standing in front of his work more than once. The list of artworks that I have stood before and been moved to tears is not a terribly long one, but it's an incredibly memorable one, and those works are on that list. That work, despite being made from industrial stainless steel, had breath. It had a pulse. It had a softness and a fragility emanating from rigid steel. Brian's titles add a poetic punctuation to his work as well. So pay attention to his titles when you view the work. They're as vital a part of the work, in my opinion, as the physical object. The work stands beautifully on its own, but I believe a good title can really create an emotional or an intellectual guideline or an anchor for the work. And I think Brian is brilliant at titling his work and adding that extra level of punctuation to the work. So do notice those titles. What I find myself continually saying about Brian and his work is that he's a visual poet. His work has a poetic quality to it that is unexpected yet unmistakable. Again, defying appearances of austerity, his work is blatantly honest and extremely personal, exploring mental illness, pharmacology, biology, sociology, and the nature of time and loss. And most recently, he has been exploring socio-political themes in response to living in this post-pandemic world that is sort of still pandemic. Again, if you haven't yet, please head down to the Baby Room Gallery to experience the work firsthand. I'll share a little bit of technical information with you about Brian, and then I'll hand the mic over to him. Brian Nelson was born in Michigan. He attended Western Michigan University in 1985 and received his BFA in sculpture in 1991. After receiving his BFA, he moved to East Lansing and began working as a welder for United States military subcontractor. While working long hours, he honed his welding and fabricating skills. After working in the industry for nearly 2.5 years, Brian decided to pursue his MFA degree at Michigan State University. In 1995, he was offered a sabbatical replacement position in the art department at the Center for Creative Studies. At CCS, he taught Drawing 1, Drawing 2, 3D design, welding, materials and processes, and beginning, intermediate, and advanced sculpture. And he is an amazing teacher, and the students that I know that experienced Brian as a teacher absolutely adored him as a teacher. He was an amazing inspiration for students. He also was the director of the metal shop and the foundry at CCS. Brian began teaching at Eastern Michigan University in 2000 and is currently a professor of sculpture and the coordinator of the sculpture program at Eastern Michigan University. He has exhibited far and wide from several galleries in Detroit and Metro Detroit region, such as a small listing of a few: Pops Packing, Detroit Artists Market, and the Contemporary Art Institute Detroit, to galleries in Buffalo, New York, Cleveland, Ohio, Indiana State University, Lexington, Kentucky, and many more places. Brian won Best in Show at the Mid-American College Art Association, and he was also honored with an Excellence in Teaching Award from Michigan State and also the Teaching Recognition Award at Eastern Michigan. Brian is known for his unique ability to combine refined craftsmanship and complex emotional and conceptual ideas into solid and fluid sculpture. I can't wait to see what he's got to share with us this evening. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Brian Nelson.
Check. Yeah, there we go. Well, how am I supposed to follow that? Thank you very much, Denise, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, EMU Libraries, for supporting the arts as well. And it's wonderful to be showing here. As soon as I found out Denise had the position, I quickly sent her an email and said, hey, I'm always looking for venues. And she said, hey, you were like on my list of people to contact. So it was kind of serendipity that I ended up here on this cold and dreary January evening. So Denise said everything in her introduction. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go way back in time, the time machine to undergraduate work, and I'm going to give you a kind of a taste of a survey of what I've done for the last 30 some years, which seems really difficult to say, but it has been quite the journey. And I would also like to give thanks to my wife, Lori, who has supported me in all of these years and years and years of working in the studio late at night. Now I work in the studio early in the morning. And it's couldn't and wouldn't have been done without her. So thank you. So to start, I'm going to start out with undergrad work. I should have asked about a laser pointer, but I don't necessarily need a laser pointer. From left to right, these are all fabricated steelworks from undergrad. So my undergrad experience, I started taking sculpture, I'm not sure of the exact date. I started at Western in '86. So that was a few years back. And then I think I started these sculptures in '87, '88, '89. And then these were all part of my Bachelor of Fine Arts show at Western. Western was one of those programs at the time that was a 5-year BFA. And most schools, they have cut their curriculum down to 124 credit hours or 135 credit hours or 136 credit hours. I was in a 170-hour BFA program, so I had to do a whole other year of BFA studies. So I had to form a BFA committee, and I had to have a BFA show, and I had to take 2 semesters of BFA seminar. And that's kind of like what most grad students do nowadays. There's not a lot of programs that have an extra year of BFA program. So these are all fabricated steel. And my initial welding experience came from a really interesting guy named John Running Johnson, who was an MFA student at Western when I was there. And one day I was just trying to figure out how to use the MIG welder, and he's like, you don't really want to use that MIG welder. He did everything with oxyacetylene welding and was amazing. He was actually an American Indian, and he would build these huge sculptures all out of welding rod. So he'd order 100 pounds of welding rod at a time, and he would have 4 or 5, 6 tanks of oxyacetylene in the studio, and did this amazing welding. And he's like, you don't want to use the MIG welder because it's like a hot glue gun for metal. Well, for me, that was the real invitation to learn how to stick pieces of metal together. And these sculptures, I felt like there had to be this scale. These are in the 7.5 foot range in height. These ones on the top. This is called Anxiety. That one front and then a side view. This is called It Happened. Front and then a back view. This is called Ode to Jerry, one of my art historians who I despised when I was in college. And this one's called Probably Malignant. And these are sculptures. These are the last sculptures that I did in undergrad, and I was basically trying to figure out how to use up all my scrap metal. So this Probably Malignant was built out of my whole bin of scrap metal. And then graduate work. Everybody starts graduate school with just this enthusiastic approach of, I'm in grad school, I can make all this new work and got all these cool ideas. And then you start making the same crap you were making when you were an undergrad. And your professors are like, no, you got to change things up here. And my committee was in particular very particular. And it seemed at a point really that there was nothing that I could do to please them. I was taking all kinds of cognates. I was also teaching a lot. I taught drawing 1, drawing 2. I begged them to let me teach as a freshman incoming graduate student, which is normally not allowed at Michigan State. And I went and bugged the chair was Roger Funk. He was a graphic designer. And I went to his office once or twice a week and bugged him to give me a teaching position. And they finally did. So I was teaching a lot, but I was also working a lot. And I apologize for the quality of these slides. These slides were all scanned after my office got broken into when I was at Eastern, and the criminals stepped all over them. So I never had slides that looked this bad before. But I started messing around with things that I had a relationship with, and one of the things that I had probably the closest relationship with was I had very poor mental health. My parents were born I'm the youngest of 4. My parents were born in the 30s, and they didn't believe in that. My mom used to say, well, here, take a warm bath and everything will be okay. And I don't know that there's a period really that I remember not having anxiety. I used to go to kindergarten, and I used to leave at recess because it was only a block away from my house, and I used to leave at recess and go get in the doghouse with my dog and play with my dog. And so it's been something that's followed me around for a long time. And so I started to make work about it. And my committee thought that was just absolutely the most taboo thing in the world. You can't be an artist and make work about your mental health, which was the most personal thing to me that I knew. And I wasn't going to make work about feminist art. I wasn't going to make work about, just make up something to make work about. I had to have something personal to me. So everything that I make is autobiographical. And it still is, even though it starts to deal with all kinds of different issues. So this is grad work. Left to right, the Rorschach plates. Those are Rorschach diagnostic plates that are silk screened on the stainless steel, and a little clock-like device that tick-tocks back and forth that's filled with Prozac. And then there's, that's called 9 Decisions. And then next to that is 9 Decisions, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. Or that's 9 Decisions, and next to that is I Have No Conscious Mental Control. That's the video piece that's on the end. And then the telescope-looking piece is a video piece also, and that is a piece about the inception. It's actually a 7-minute video of where the sperm swims through the canal and approaches the egg and wiggles its way in, and the mating process actually takes place. And then the last piece here on the right, bottom right, is me actually, I started working around with video, more video, and kind of building my own video projectors. And this piece is based on my grandfather who had a stroke and was using a walker. So this was my my own kind of walker here with the wheels, minus the tennis balls on the bottom. But and then I used a small Sony color TV and a magnifying glass from a projection TV to make my own video projector. This piece, not 9 Decisions. There has always been something wrong with my face. So I've been making work that was starting to kind of conceptually gain some ground. Even though, it dealt with the mental health issues, and there was one person in particular on my committee that still just thought that was unacceptable, but I pretty much decided that I wasn't going to pay attention to that viewpoint anymore, and I'm going to move forward. I had one of the best seminar teachers my first year at Michigan State. His name was Doug Kegler, and not only was he just an absolutely great friend, I still keep in touch with him on Facebook, wish him a happy birthday now and then. He lives in Bend, Oregon now, on 100 acres of property in a valley in Bend, Oregon, pretty much in a self-sustaining home. He had us, in the MFA seminar class, do a piece that was based on a cubit. And that cubit is from your fist to your elbow. And I'm like, I've never made anything that small in my life. My mom had been a seamstress for 20 years, and I had done quite a bit of sewing. So I fabricated this metal piece that's on the wall, which was kind of like a pipe connection. And then this sewn felt piece ended up being longer than my cubit, but it was acceptable because it was kind of an addition. And it came all the way down to the floor, and then on the end of the floor there was a little, what's called a piezo microphone, or a piezo speaker. And inside of the metal piece there was a poem by a poet by the name of Stephen Jesse Bernstein, who I'd been reading a lot, and he actually put out one album before he unfortunately took his own life. He was a horrible heroin addict. He lived in the sewers in LA and lived on the street in LA, and was an incredibly interesting guy, but not the way you want to live. So it's based off one of his poems called "There's Always Been Something Wrong with My Face." And I thought that was just, it seemed really effective. And I thought if there's one way that I can really get the work to communicate maybe outside of this mental health venue in a sneaky way, because obviously Bernstein had mental health issues of his own, I thought this would be a way to do that. So this poem is about 15 minutes long. And for the first time ever, I had someone who was literally physically interacting with my sculpture. You can see this felt is all kind of worn and dirty, because people would walk up and pick it up and listen to the poem, and most of them were appalled by what they were hearing, because he talks about putting black lacquer on his face and shaving all the hair off his head and painting his face purple and or cutting his face with razor blades. It was pretty dark, but poignantly funny and ridiculous. But then you realize that it's serious at the same time. So it was kind of rough, but it's really the first time that someone interacted with my work and felt like there was a little bit of warmth there, and there was a real kind of connection between the idea and the object. And for me, that was really, really important. And the next work is important in a lot of ways as well, because it's a theme that fits and continues in my work to this day. And that is this idea of desire. What is it that I desire, and what is it that I want? And that question is at the beginning of everything that I start to build. And a lot of times it hits you from behind. A lot of times it pops you in the back of the head. Sometimes it happens really easily, but most times not. Good ideas are hard to come by, and they don't happen very often. I mean, really good ideas don't happen that often. And you make a lot of debris. You make a lot of debris that gets kicked out of the way, and sometimes you don't finish it. Sometimes you do. This piece started out that way and ended up being successful, and for me that was really important, especially because I spent a lot of money on it, and having the neon bent, and I got to actually bend part of the neon myself because I was working with somebody that I knew, and it was important that I finished it, and I struggled and then finally finished it. And I use this analogy that I've used for quite a long time, and it seems really stupid and sophomoric, but it's the idea, and I talk to my students about this constantly, two things actually, and the first being that if you think of yourself as a locomotive and you're going down the tracks, and you come upon this idea or this thing, and you make this thing, and you succeed, and you gain knowledge from this thing, and you learn about it, and it does some of what the things that you wanted it to do. So you get to add a car to your train. You get to put that object behind you, and it stays there, and you can reference that object, and you can say, hey, I can think about what I did in that last piece, and I can move forward. And you keep building that train until it starts to get longer and longer and longer and longer, until you don't finish a piece. And then when you don't finish a piece, you put it aside, and I have probably a half dozen pieces that I put aside that still bug me, and I still look at a lot of the times. I try to leave them in a sight line that I can see them. So, in fact, one I had some better ideas for last week, and I'm thinking about finishing. And there's a couple others that are still kind of poking at me to finish. But not finishing is the worst thing that you can do, because then you don't have that knowledge in the back of your car and in the back of your train, and it leaves those ideas empty, and it leaves that space empty, and you have to make up for that in some kind of way. Stop saying This piece is called Tears for Emily and Cole. This was done in 2001 and was in a show at that time and had a huge write-up in the paper, and that it was all based on the Twin Towers and all that stuff that happened in 2001. So it became the September 11th piece, and that had nothing to do with the inception of the piece. The piece was about the birth of my son, and the piece was about, I'd been reading tons of Emily Dickinson. I know that she's a poet that everybody's like, Emily Dickinson is just kind of Emily Dickinson. Well, she's not just kind of Emily Dickinson. She's kind of absolutely amazing, and the words go straight to your heart. And along with Emily Dickinson, there's an artist named Vernon Fisher who wrote his own little poems, and he did these on postcards. He's an artist from Texas, and he did these on postcards, and he would start writing a poem, and then he would end this poem with this kind of ridiculous science, this quote about something that happened in science, like how photosynthesis worked or how something else worked. So I started borrowing, using it as an influence, and this text is actually sandblasted in the surface of the table, and I'm sorry that you can't read it. I can read it on this screen, but it starts out as part of an Emily Dickinson poem. People may be familiar with I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. And so it starts out with the first couple lines of that, and then starts to talk about genetic connections and making familial genetic connections and how those genetic connections happen, and understanding what it means to be a family. And that, after the birth of my son, became incredibly important to me, and art started to kind of move back a little bit, and having this other life to take care of and manage became incredibly important. The carved salt tears also, I don't have a detail, but they have text on them as well that's sandblasted into them that begin the poem. And each tear says, I heard a fly buzz when I died. And you can't, unfortunately, you can almost see it on this one. The little screens, you could probably see it better, but. Thank you very much. Yeah, the tables are all fabricated in the studio. So they start out as flat sheets of metal, round cylinders, pieces of tubing, and everything is all hand fabricated. I use a metal brake to bend these edges. Like I said, I sandblasted the text on. And then the salt is something that I've been using for years. These are made from deer licks. You can buy at Tractor Supply Company. I used to buy them at a company called Farm and Fleet, which was in my hometown. They're becoming harder and harder to find, but there's actually a feed store that we get bird feed at that still sells them. And it's a bear to carve salt. If you have a cut on your hand, you're going to find it very quickly because the salt gets in the cuts on your hands and gets in your face and gets in your eyes, and it's a lot of carving. And you pretty much can dedicate a grinder that's going to die. You can blow it out all you want, but the salt ends up ruining it. So I started out hand carving them, getting them to a specific scale and size that I wanted, and then basically it was a grinder with 36 grit sandpaper on it, and then probably 60 grit or 40 grit, and then all the way up to probably about 220. So they tend to shine, but they have this transparency and they glow when they're lit. And that was really, for me, encouraging to see see how the salt reacted. And that pushed me back into moving into video. And I made this piece when my grandmother on my father's side passed away, and it's called Dig Gene Therapy. So I carved and fabricated these salt chromosomes, and the video, and again, fabricated the stainless steel table. This is one of the biggest tables that I had made. It's about a 5-foot by 10-foot sheet of stainless steel. Back then it was for a price that didn't break my bank. And then I had the tabletop fabricated. I actually worked in the shop with the guys and fabricated the tabletop. And for the price I paid for the piece of steel, I'm like, can we make sure that there's not scratches all over the surface? One side comes with a protective coating on it, but the other side doesn't. And these guys were just flipping this thing all over the place, and I'm like, wait, can we slow things down a little bit? So it ended up with some maker's marks on it. That's what I like to call them, some artistic marks. A couple scratches, which I wasn't really thrilled about. But so Dig Gene Therapy was about my grandmother's passing, but it was also about finding things. And one of the things that was really, really emotional for me is I got all of my grandmother's books. I told my dad that's all I want is her books. And she wasn't a big, huge reader, but she loved poetry. And I happened to grab all these books and get them home and started unboxing them. And I had never known this in my life, but I opened up a book and it was from her poetry class, and it was all Emily Dickinson. And she had written in the margins what she thought every poem meant and what they were about. And it was just like this epiphany for me, and this emotional epiphany for me. And I still have that book, and I will treasure it forever. It's just incredible. And I never knew. Because you don't have those kinds of conversations with your grandparents, unfortunately, until it's that time, until that before their passing, and time gets too short. If you have a chance to get to know your grandparents, it's great to do it when you can. And that's one of the things that I made sure, and my wife and I made sure that our children did, is get to know their grandparents and have conversations with them and learn from them and understand things from them. So what I was doing in this video was carving, this is, it's hard to see in the slide itself, but this is all grass that's actually photographed. It's not necessarily moving, it's pretty static. And most of the video works that I do are just a non-narrative video. This one does have a bit of a narrative to it. I'm actually digging, and what I'm doing is this image in the screen, I'm digging that until that is all a hole. So from border to border to border to border, I'm digging that out as a hole. So here, I'm digging, and little did I know I was going to run into the hardest clay that you could possibly run into, and I ran into a ton of old bricks, and by the time I dug for 3 hours, and by the time I was done, even with gloves on, I had blisters and sweated and was, you can actually, in the actual video, you can see the sweat dripping down. So I dug away that entire area. And people came up to me in one of the first exhibitions that I showed this in, and I showed this at Buckham Gallery in a show called The Dark Show, where everybody was doing video work or some kind of projected or lighted work. And everybody was like, oh, you're digging a grave for your grandmother. And I'm like, no, it's really absolutely the opposite of that. I'm digging for those things that she knew and those things that I didn't get to learn from her. And that was incredibly important to me, to dig for those things, to learn from her, and understand how she thought about things and how she thought about the world. And she was she lived with my grandfather, who was a Swede, who came here through Ellis Island and became a blueberry farmer and cussed in Swedish all the time. And she lived with him. She managed to live with him their whole lives and put up with him. And she became a much different person after my grandfather passed away, much more calm and much more genteel and much easier to talk to. So there's a close-up view of one of the, there was text on all of the chromosomes as well. So mother, father, son, daughter. So the video pieces continued. I was on a theme. I bought a couple video projectors, a couple used video projectors. Actually bought them from CCS when they upgraded. So they were getting older and kind of cruddier, but they were cheap. Because at the time, these video projectors were running $3,000, $2,500, money that I didn't have to spend while I was working at CCS. So, but I love the fact that what this sculpture could do. I was thinking about printmaking, because I've always done printmaking, and I was thinking about doing a print on this, either a silk screen or even a photo transfer on the top surface. This is, again, a fabricated stainless steel table. This is a fabricated oxygen tank. Started with a normal oxygen tank, cut it in half, added aluminum pipe in between, welded it, and sanded it so it looked exactly like an oxygen tank. That was exactly my height, 6'2". And the piece is titled Her Breath, the Wind for Lori. And I showed you that image of desire before. And one of the things about that word desire is those days that actually Denise and I were kind of lamenting about, when you have a perfectly blue sky with those white puffy clouds floating by, and you can go outside and you can look at the depth of the blue and the layers of the clouds and what they do. And that is still, much like that desire, that is still in the work and helps drive the work, because it's a necessity. It's a personal necessity to experience that and have that in the work. A lot of these are on 6-hour video loops, so I've set the camera up outside and run a loop and run it as long as I can, and then so they are totally non-narrative. It's the wind blowing, it is the clouds moving. There's times when there's no clouds in the image, and there's times where there's clouds moving through the image like there are here. This is a close-up. That funky form you see there that looks like a drain, but it's going the wrong way. And you've noticed the oxygen bottles. Those forms are about breathing and about pushing out oxygen. It's not about breathing in oxygen. It's about pushing out oxygen. And in the show, you see pieces that are based on, there's a piece that's based on climate change. That's something that's always been in my purview, and I've always been thinking about. From way back when they did the biodome, or whatever they called it, that self-sustaining dome where you could live and it produced its own oxygen. And I thought about the fact that we walk around and we're breathing oxygen all the time, and we have to have trees that make up that oxygen and remove that carbon dioxide. And so that became another kind of thing that I had in my pocket and began using a lot. And it shows up in a lot of the work. And then Charlie McCarthy showed up. And Charlie connected to the oxygen tank. This is titled Revisiting. Whoops. Why did that go off? Sorry about that. This is called Revisiting McCarthyism for Charlie, Jim, and Joseph. Joseph McCarthy obviously being the paranoid McCarthy that was in office. Jim McCarthy being a really horrible psychiatrist that I saw for about 6 weeks and said, dude, you're more crazy than I am, so I'm not going to come see you anymore. And Charlie McCarthy being the ventriloquist doll that Ingrid Bergman used in his shows. And I was enamored by Ingrid Bergman and Charlie McCarthy. I actually saw them live at the Kellogg Center it wasn't called the Kellogg Center back then. It's the same place they shot Channel 3 Clubhouse in Kalamazoo, or Battle Creek. And it was amazing. And from then I wanted to be a ventriloquist. So I collected Charlie and Howdy Doody and Odd Nerdum, and I kept them all through graduate school, and so they started to find their way into my work. And as you can see in the show, there's not a lot of images here necessarily, but in the show there's several images of Charlie. It's a personality that it's a really kind of complex humor that I think is it's important to the work. It warms the work up, confuses some people, confuses me sometimes, but at the same time, I think it's one of those necessities. This is, I Can't Tell You How Sorry I Am. And this is a piece that is ongoing. Started in about 2003 or 4. And those are most of the antidepressant medications that I've taken over the years, if not all. I don't know that my newest one is in there, but most of them are in there. And that's everything from the really good to the really bad are in there. And the problem is they're starting to degrade at a pretty rapid pace now, so I haven't shown this piece for a long time. And by degrade, it's just the humidity makes the gelatin capsules start to melt, and it might end up being a totally different, really interesting piece once they all start to degrade and mold and do funky things. And again, there's that backwards kind of pushed up drain that's kind of breathing for the piece. Cast bronze, you've already seen a bunch of bronze in some of the earlier pieces. This piece is called This Is My Own Bag of Knots, and I actually took a paper bag. I put about 4 coats of shellac on it, and then it was sturdy enough that I filled the bag probably about a third of the way filled with wax, and painted it up the sides and poured it out, tilted it around, and of course it got mushy and that's where a lot of the wrinkles came from. And I got it about 1/8 of an inch thick, and then I cut it into enough pieces that I could sprue it up, and I cast the paper bag, and it turned out. And then after about 60 or 80 hours of chasing, which is cleanup of the bronze work, it actually looks like a paper bag now. And a lot of people are like, oh, I thought that was paper. And it's not paper. And then I've done 3 of these. And one was bought by one of my dear best friends. Another one was bought by the new director of the DIA, which I had no idea. It was in one of the shows at Cade. And I'm like, Aaron, where's my piece? And he's like, oh, I owe you a check. Your piece was bought. And I'm like, it'd be nice if I could get the check for the piece. But like I said, this is called My Own Bag of Knots. And this is another thing that came from my grandmother. The saying bag of knots. She had all these funky sayings that she would use, but she's like, well, everybody always has their own bag of knots. And thinking of, you could have a bag of knots, meaning that you sit there and you tie these knots and you put them in a bag because you want something to do, or you can think of it as your life and having a bag of knots that you're basically untying and trying to figure things out. And that's the way I looked at it. And I always thought that it was an interesting saying. And she always used to say, it's a tough row to hoe. And it took me the longest time to figure out what the hell she was talking about when you say it's a tough row to hoe. Well, she lived on a farm, and you're hoeing, and it's a tough row to hoe. And I finally figured that out. So this is my bag of knots. This is the one that I'm not selling and I'm keeping. In fact, I just got it back from a show in Indianapolis, and it's still in the studio. And it needs to come back to my house now that all my wife's Christmas stuff is put away. I can put my sculptures back out. So this is all cast and fabricated bronze, and then I don't know that I've thrown away a prescription medical bottle in at least the past 25 years. So I have cabinets and cabinets and cabinets filled with them. I've thought about doing castings with them. I've thought about doing displays with them. Damien Hirst has already done the pharmacy piece, so I'm really not interested in that. I'm more interested in them as a kind of dialogue and a kind of understanding of those bottles and what they mean. And then I did a piece for one of my students who became really good friends with as a student, and he became really good friends with my kids. He loved my kids. And Casey had a lot of issues. And I talked to Casey consistently about Casey's issues, and he called me one day, and he had tried to take his own life. And he said, I need to go to U of M Psych Hospital, and he called me. And I was like, wow, this is tough. Having my own experience with those issues, but I immediately drove to his house and took him to U of M Hospital, to the psych ward, and then afterwards, it took me probably a good 3 weeks to kind of figure out how to process that. And I've dealt with that with a lot of students, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've seen one for a long time, and I felt like I should have known those signs and those symbols and those things, but it's really difficult to figure out, and it's a hard thing to know. But it became a really important piece to me, and this is actually a moving video piece. I was going to upload the video to it, but it's long, and I didn't want to deal with it. This is actually me taking a prescription bottle, looking at it. It actually waits till the camera focuses on what the prescription is, and then I throw the piece in the bag. So this is an LCD screen, and then it actually plays the video. And the bag goes from empty to full and then restarts. This is Braille for Bag of Knots. And then that's a still from the video of me actually waiting for the camera to actually focus on the prescription bottle and then toss the bottle into the bag. This is called erythrocytes, perforation of the cells. With all these pieces about breathing and the oxygen tanks, erythrocytes are the red blood cells that actually carry the oxygen around your body. And I had... for the longest time, I had this wonderful dumpster, huge 100-yard dumpster right next to the sculpture building, which all these wonderful things would get thrown away in. So one day they threw away about 10 of these pallets that had these wonderful orange, they're called pallet bumpers, and they actually bolt onto the bottom of the pumper and the pallet, and they're a kind of a plasticky rubber bumper. And I thought, wow, those look almost exactly like erythrocytes. So I made a rubber mold, and I cast them all in bronze, and then began fabricating this table. And I wanted this table to kind of become invisible, like the texture of the insides of the lungs and the penetration of the cells through the lungs. And again, this is all hand fabricated. The top piece is perforated metal that you buy. You can actually buy it from McMaster-Carr or specialty companies. The tubing you can't buy. So I made a jig, and for 2 weeks I sat at the drill press and drilled every one of these holes in these tubes all the way down to where I started to kind of spread them apart and have them disappear and become solid tubing. I won't do that again. Many cuts later. This piece is called 16 years, Paroxetine, or Paxil. This was a drug that I was actually on, probably one of the most successful antidepressant drugs that I've ever taken. And this is a ball molecule representation of that drug. These were all built using Photoshop and a program called CubeMole, which you can render these objects. And what I did was use those programs to rotate the molecule and take various still shots, and then start fabricating the pieces. So I started by fabricating the balls. I purchased the balls with a grant that I got from Eastern, and they were purchased as hemispheres. So the first thing I had to do was weld those hemispheres together to make a sphere, a full solid sphere, and then start by putting together the benzene rings and then the additional molecules that are attached to each benzene ring. And then that started to give me some kind of idea of where I was going to position and how things got connected together. These ended up taking years. I was going to build a whole bunch of them. I ended up in total building 8. The Prozac piece. I did a different type of molecular structure for this ball molecule. This is alprazolam or Xanax. Probably one of the only reasons I'm standing up here talking cogently. And then this got moved out of position, but this is dear and near to my heart. I had to make this piece after Madame Louise Bourgeois passed away. Probably one of the best sculptors that existed. I think she made the most incredible work, whether it be textile, whether it be the cage pieces, whether it be the carved marble penis pieces, just this incredible, incredible, thoughtful work. And then the spiders came along and I became even more enamored with her thinking and what she was doing, and I miss her. I miss her work. Another one from the Molecule series. This one's called Losing at a Higher Rate. This is Zoloft. This is a drug that I did not enjoy taking. This piece is called The Death of N1, How to Disappear. In 2006, I had the pleasure of getting shingles. And get your shingles vaccines, people. Shingles is one of the most miserable possible things you can have. The pain is horrendous. So I started taking this drug, Neurontin, or it's also known as gabapentin, Fantorex, Gabaron, but it's a nerve deadener. And what they do in order to get it under control, the pain, which is basically feels like a glove full of pins getting stuck in your head and then pulled out, or wherever you have it on your body. I had it on my head and my face, which was absolutely the worst. So it's literally like someone sticking pins in your head and then slowly pulling them back out and then doing it again. Enough that it makes you nauseous. And so I was prescribed 3,000 milligrams of Neurontin. And finally the pain started to deaden a little bit. But then I realized that your hands deaden a little bit and all your nerves deaden a little bit. And it just got to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. So I gave up on it and I started using these various kinds of foams and other treatments, none of which really worked until it went away. And now I have, when I say the death of N1, I have a nerve in the back of my head that is completely dead. So if I, in the sculpture studio, if I whack my head on something, and finally noticed that there's blood running down my back, I realized that I cut something bad enough that, but I can't feel that area. And when I cut my hair, I can't feel it. It's pretty strange. But this is cast bronze and stainless steel that are welded together. And I actually had the welding company fabricate the welding wire for this because I needed a very specific size, not 0.030 like you would use in a MIG welder. I had them pull I think it was a 0.064 So it was a really weird size, but it was also made up of an alchemy that was used to connect the bronze with the stainless steel. Because those metals melt at different temperatures, and in order to get good welds, I had to have them pull the own wire, which was expensive, but it was worth it. This piece lived in the president's office. Believe it or not, our president actually supports sculpture. His wife is a huge sculpture and art supporter. And it was in the president's office for about 5 or 6 years. There's a little detail view. The welds are about 1/8 of an inch. And I didn't obviously take the time to grind them off. And then this is my last piece. This is Effexor. It's called All the Clouds Around My Heart. This is the largest of all of them, and probably was literally the most difficult and physically the most difficult ones to make. This was mathematically the most difficult piece to make. And this piece is all welded from the inside. So there's no external welds, but about half a dozen in one spot. This one, just trying to figure out, not only did the benzene rings, were the benzene rings there, but they also moved up and down, and I don't know the chemistry of exactly how it works, but it was a bear to make. And again, the stainless steel spheres started out as hemispheres and then got welded and made into spheres and polished. Took me a good 2 years. And then I decided I was done. Too much. Too much grinding, too much polishing. Out of my grant, I spent close to $700 on abrasives just to get the piece finished. And that is it, the end. And I ended up talking way too long, like I said. I would like to, I'd like to say I did that on purpose. I didn't want to show any of the images from the show. And that the work is changing. I'm in the progress of changing the work and trying not to be such a perfectionist. It's killing me. And leaving more marks from the artist and letting things happen like they happen sometimes. I don't meticulously measure everything like I used to. I decide on a size and I say, you know what, that's a good size, I'm going to make it that size. But please, any questions, anybody? Yeah.
Our parallels are very, very cool. I mean, also worked with Jonathan Johnson.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, and learned significant things from it. I'm very, very familiar with what you quoted as him saying.
Yep.
He said the same thing many years later. That idea, when I first saw the show, when it very first went up, I related to that idea and that aesthetic of the medical aspect, seeing the polishing, the precision, and when you talk about that part of the work, and then you talk about the
First of all, I clean very well before I start working. A lot of the work, especially a lot of the stainless steel table work, I have I have 50 moving blankets. So that sheet of stainless steel comes in the studio, and if I can, it has a mill finish, and it's protected on both sides by plastic. That sheet of stainless steel used to cost me $300. That sheet of stainless that I just priced out is about $1,500 right now for a 16 gauge piece of stainless steel. That's out of my price range. So I try to buy scrap, and even the prices for scrap now are insane. Stainless steel contains tons of chromium, zinc, and other materials that they're using to make batteries with. And you know that batteries are it. Car battery technology, electric cars, that's all the whip. So all that chromium that they're mining, and they're mining it in somewhere like Romania has one of the biggest chromium mines, or somewhere really small. But the meticulous part is just keeping everything really clean, and then only welding and only fabricating on the days that I feel like I can weld and fabricate. If the first thing I do is sit down and start to weld on something, and I make a bead that looks like a bird turd, and you know what that is, I either have to get out of there and say, not going to do that right now, and sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to do that today, I'm going to work on something else. So welding is a sport that you have to practice constantly. So, and I don't like to practice on my pieces, and I teach my students, don't practice on your own piece. So I'll put two pieces of scrap metal together and I'll weld until, hey, I got this, so I can weld what I want to weld. I don't grind. I don't use a grinding wheel, ever. I like to file, or I use a sanding wheel. I'll use a flap disc just to get it down to where it's almost level with the surface, and then I'll use a file. And with a file, it's really hard to make a mistake. With a grinding disc, it's really easy to make a mistake that doesn't go away. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your gifts, things of that nature.
Thanks for coming.
You know, we live in a very cruel world, and there's some great things in this world. And from my observation, it looks like your work is therapeutic to you. Would that be reasonable to say?
Yeah, it can't not be. It's not. It's an outlet. I wouldn't say that it's an outlet always that's in a positive way, because it is physical work, and we all suffer the consequences from that. Working on particular pieces, in particular the bronze cast pieces, when you grind for 9.5 hours in the studio and you go home, and you wake up the next morning and you can't feel your hands for the first 35 minutes you're awake, like you can't hold a cup of coffee, that gets to be problematic. And I'm of the age now where that gets more and more problematic.
So here's my question. My wife and I were talking the other day about the realities of mental health and things of that nature. We were talking about healing. And I made a comment. I said, you know, people don't get enough validation. People don't get enough, hey, that's a great job. You're doing great work. I really like what you're doing. And so it's as though people search for attention through mental health, announcing depression, announcing anxiety and addiction. It's almost like that has become a badge of honor. And even medication, it seems like this trophy sometimes. People, I'm on this, I'm on that, I'm on Percocet, I'm on, and that seems to be like a trophy. And here you are, you know, with your work, and you had your medications there. So here's my question. As an artist, where's the fine line between doing things that help heal people and then focusing on the challenges of mental health, the medication, the promotion of medication? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. I certainly, in no way, shape, or form, would put these things on display as trophies because that's the last thing that they are. I myself tried to take my own life, and probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made. And that's the reality of today's society, especially pandemic and post-pandemic. I never would look at it that way. I would look at it as, I just kind of burped and lost my chain of thought, but I think what you said is kind of spot on, but it's not a badge of honor. I just got my chain of thought back. In fact, if you ask, I forget how many millions of people deal with mental health issues on a daily basis and take medication on a daily basis. Millions and millions of people. I think it's close to 40 million people in the United States take medication. It's got to be higher than that now. That may be an old statistic. But most people don't talk about it. They don't talk about it. Just like they don't talk about, most people don't talk about the fact that they tried to take their own life. And people should talk about it. People should talk about it all the time. And I'm very open about it. People can ask me any question about anything that they want to ask me about, and I'll give you an answer. That's my nature. If anything, that's my therapy. That's my way of dealing with it, is by talking about it. It's not necessarily in the making, because the making is physical, and the making becomes a release in the fact that I get some bumping techno music playing, or some, you name it, anything, some really good rap music, some James Brown. I listen to music constantly in the studio. I have to have music going in the studio. And that's therapeutic for me. And the physical work is therapeutic for me. Like I said, it's not as therapeutic as it used to be, is because as you get older, your back hurts and your hands hurt and your head hurts and your body hurts.
I have one more comment. The reason why I brought that up is because as artists, it seems as though there's a responsibility to help heal with the art. And you brought up a very good statistic, roughly 40 million people on medication. My research, which many people might not believe, tells me that it's all a plan. That we have a mental health crisis because there are certain people who plan it. Much of our food is not food. And much of the music is very detrimental, to us. The messaging is very bad. Much of the media is bad. So all of that is an aggregate of a plan. And then we know that there's big bank in medication and pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah.
So with that being said, it seems as though people who have the art of healing would use their art to help heal. And so that's what would be my question. At what point do you say, I'm going to use my art to help heal in whatever way I can?
You know what? I think any kind of visual experience where you're looking and you're gaining knowledge about imagery or objects or whatever it may be, I think that is healing to some degree. It might not be healing in exactly the way that you're talking about it. I hate pharmacology, but you know what? I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to live without it. And I want to live. Got a lot to live for. And it's a necessity. Is it a plan? Hell yes, it's a plan. I mean, they make billions and billions and billions of dollars a year. And they don't care about people. When Pfizer moved out of Ann Arbor, they moved out of Ann Arbor and they left thousands and thousands of people high and dry. No jobs, no nothing. Maybe a severance package. But, the CEO of GlaxoSmithKline makes some outrageous amount of money last year. It's sick, the amount of money. But in reality, the amount of research that has to go into it, and, there's some that's believable and there's some things that aren't. I don't believe there's any conspiracy theory that people want to serve us bad food and give us drugs for certain reasons or do anything like that. I think that we have an obligation to make that informed choices about what it is that we do, and we have to make those informed choices about what it is that we do. And we just came through a time where those informed choices did become really, really difficult to make, and they still are. What is truth now, post 2016? What do you believe? What do you believe on the news? What do you believe when someone tells you something? Those become really difficult issues. You had a question.
Yeah, it's kind of jumping off of that a little bit, but I was wondering, as someone who struggles with mental health a lot, sometimes it's hard, sometimes art is therapeutic and sometimes art is, detrimental physically and that kind of stuff, and sometimes, it's not the day to make art. How do you balance, wanting to make art or needing to make art with your mental health, and with, how does your mental health affect your art process?
It's ingrained in my art process. I told you that Paxil was one of my favorite medications. My doctor that prescribed the Paxil to me was my psychiatrist for 16 years. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a psychiatrist in Vietnam, and obviously saw the most horrific things that you could possibly see. Moved back, came back to the United States, studied and got another degree in child psychiatry, and then got another degree in art therapy and art psychiatry, using art in psychiatry. He was incredible, and he would give me articles in JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine, that talked about creativity and how the antidepressant medications, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, affect the pathways in your brain. Antidepressants change how your brain works. There's no doubt about it. Some permanently, some not permanently. So you figure out how to deal with it. That's how you do it. There's days that I can't make art. There's days that I can't stop making art, that I have to, within my physical constraints or whatever those physical constraints are. And you just have to learn how to deal with it. And all the work is not necessarily about antidepressants and medication. There's a lot of joyous things that happen in there, which I'd be happy to answer questions in the gallery about any of those issues. Anybody else? Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to ask this in a little bit, it's not a big question. But I'm interested because, and I think it would just be good to hear from you about your process of conceptual development. Like, do you find a concept that you're interested in while you're doing something else, or do you kind of say, this is what I want to work with, I'm going to find my way through this? How do you work with that? I mean, do you make little notes? How do you put these things together in a way?
I don't make little notes. This has been one of the best things for me. And before that, it was a Polaroid camera. And that was a suggestion from someone that I actually taught with at CCS when I was teaching there. Just take Polaroids and live with it, look at it, see what it is. I would say conceptually what I do is I chase the concept until I grab a hold of it and get it by the tail and figure it out. And I think that's what I still do. And that's better, I think, than having a concept and making a piece. It's more exciting for me as a maker, and I think people get more out of the pieces. The viewer gets more out of the pieces that way.
I had a similar question, Brian, we can finish up unless somebody else has something else, but I was also curious, because your work leaves seemingly so little room for error, that because it's so labor intensive and meticulous and precise, that I'm totally fascinated that you're chasing a concept while you're doing that it's not pre-planned. So do you have a vision and then you just go to town on it and it comes close? Or do you have to scrap things entirely midway when you're working in something, in stainless and move differently?
I never scrap it. I never full on scrap it. I may put it away and it comes back later. I've saved stuff. There's stuff in that work in there that's, there's some pieces that I got from when my grandfather passed away that are 100 years old. Little pieces of hardware. There's objects in there that I picked up on the curb. Mary, she was picked up on the curb as someone's garbage. And that concept came quick and easy. But then building the piece, it's just random. People think that I precision measure everything. I don't precision measure everything. I've got a really nice layout ruler, and I measure what I want, the size, roughly the size of the table to be, and then I have to do that really precisely. I do that with what's called a scribe. So I make a line that is thinner than like a .05 pencil lead. It is just that small. And in order to bend a table on a bending brake and have it come out and be perfect like that, that's what takes time. I can take a whole Saturday from 8 in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon just bending that table to make sure that it comes out exactly the way that I want it to. Because I don't like to buy materials over again. And where things become really testy is where I take that piece of stainless steel, like for instance, Tears for Emily and Cole had that text sandblasted on it. I had to lay out that text with the matting, and I had to pull all the text, make sure that it was all correct. I had to tape off the entire piece, and I had to stick it in the sandblaster, and I had to hope to God that it sandblasted exactly the way that I wanted to, and that my masking didn't pop up or something like that. Or the Mary piece, I had to drill a hole in the middle of that bent table that was 4.5 or 5 inches in diameter. That's not an easy thing to do. So I buy a giant hole saw and I make a wooden template that the hole saw fits into, and I bolt it down and I drill that hole in there. And it's incredibly time consuming and difficult, but you can't mess it up.
So you have a pretty good level of confidence with your idea chasing.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. And
you know where you're going, I would say.
Yeah.
And you just have,
that comes from 30 years of experience.
right.
When I had this show at Concordia, I had one of my MFA students come up to me and say, how do you make something like this that is so cohesive and that each piece communicates with each piece? And I said, Kevin, I've been doing this for 30 years. This isn't something that you can it just doesn't happen.
Right.
And when you look at artists, some people it does happen. They're the ones that are super, really talented. I never had that much talent.
Brian.
I didn't. I didn't. I knew how to draw, and I knew how to make some things. And what I spent the most of my time in my childhood doing was taking things apart and putting it back together. And that's what led to this interest in making sculpture ultimately. To see if I could take it apart, fix it, and put it back together. And I still do that at home. My kids' toys, when they would break, I would take them apart, try to fix it and put it back together and see if I could get it working again. But it's as much about hard work as it is about talent. Otherwise, it would be unteachable.
Right. Totally.
And we know that it's not unteachable.
Yes. I agree completely.
All right.
Any more questions?
I can't talk anymore.
Okay,
I
Brian,
can
talk
answer
on.
any more questions. But
If anyone has any more questions,
Please.
please bring them down to the gallery and ask Brian in the baby room. There is food, but it's in the Strosacker room tonight. So the room to the right of the baby room has all the treats and deliciousness. So please come help yourself to snacks and then meet us in the baby room. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much,
thank you
Brian.
for coming. And I'm happy to take more questions when we're down there in the gallery for sure.